Welcome to Just the Meat and Potatoes. During this 3 minutes, I like to take the opportunity to try to summarize the study and the preaching that we've been doing as a local church for this week. And so it's a joy to do that this morning. We've been looking at the story of the wise men in Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. And what I began to discover there is this is really the first episode in recounting of coming to worship Christ in the chronological order of the Gospels as we have them. And it's a joy to think about what happened in those moments. That these scientists, these pagans from Persia would see a star in the east and literally come to worship Jesus. In the process of a pretty deep study of that, I began to recognize that the word for worship was a very interesting word. In fact, some of the versions translate to say they came to pay him homage. As I began to look at it, Matthew uses that word 13 different times in his gospel in a number of different contexts, and I began to recognize, along with the great scholar Albert Barnes, that it may not truly express the depth of adoration and worship. That these men may have seen, like N.T. Wright said, that Jupiter and Saturn line up and come up with some kind of conclusion, but they didn't really know the heart and purposes of the eternal God and respond to him in worship. And so they come by way of Herod and find their way there. And it's a beautiful story, but the climax of the story is really verse 12, when it says they leave that place of worship and they go home by a different way, a different route. My conviction is they came without a full understanding of worship, but they left with the full experience of having worshiped the Christ child, presenting the most valuable gifts of their lives that they could bring. They went away totally different. And I believe they went away totally different primarily for two simple reasons. Number one, they recognized that Jesus was now the new king. The whole chapter, all of chapter 2, in fact, is about Herod. And Fred Craddock makes it very clear that the wise men are plopped down in the middle of this story to make one point, and that is Jesus is the new king. I'm so challenged this week to recognize in my moments of worship on the Lord's Day and all week long that primarily what always must happen in worship is that I come away recognizing there is a new king and a new Lord, and that Jesus can be trusted for all the valuable issues of my life. Secondarily, they come away with a new sense of the Lord's leadership in their lives. They had been determining their steps by the stars, and at the end of this story they come away with a clear dream. Dreams seem kind of nebulous and airy until you read the first two chapters and recognize that God has been leading Joseph clearly with the dream. Now he leads these wise men with a dream. What a glorious picture to recognize that in those moments that we'll worship this week, we can come to the recognition that we have a new king and a new Lord in Jesus, and bring all of our stuff to him, and that he will lead us forward in a brand new way. Matthew sets the tone for worship. He begins to identify Jesus as the King of the Jews. And in the process, he begins to instruct us how to worship. May God help us this week in all of our moments of worship to recognize his lordship and find new leadership for every day. Thank you for spending a few minutes with us in Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 12, and joining us again for Just the Meat and Potatoes.